I would offer this question to you to start this out, and that would be that Ronald Reagan spoke eloquently of the shining city on the hill, 2 centuries and more as he spoke. And my question is, are we still that shining city? And if so, is there another level for our destiny? And what would you do to take us there, and how would you define that to us?
The answer is yes, we're still that shining city. Because the last time I checked, nobody was trying to sneak out of America. They were trying to sneak into America. Despite our problems and despite our challenges, and we have a lot of problems, here's how I would take the United States of America back to the top of the hill. But we're still on that point higher than any other country in the world. First, secure our national security strength. I happen to believe that this administration is weakening America militarily. This is not what Americans want. The world is not safer, so we should not be a weaker nation. For example, there's a lot of concern about Iran. When I was on the Citizen Advisory Board of the Strategic Air Command, today it's called STRATCOM, I became aware of many of our strategic military capabilities. We have capabilities that we can deploy around the world in order to help us and our friends to make sure that we keep them in check. And so the first thing is to secure our position in the world and make it clear that America will not weaken its military strength. My foreign policy approach is very simple. Clearly identify who our friends are. Clearly identify who our enemies are. And stop giving money to our enemies and stop telling the enemy what our next move is going to be in a particular country. The second biggest challenge, the economy. So goes the economy, so goes the strength of the United States of America. We are the strongest economy in the world at our weakest point because of our free market system. And we need to re-strengthen that free market system. And it starts with one fundamental economic truth. The business sector is the engine of economic growth. If you do not start with that principle, we're never going to move this economy. This is why I have proposed my bold plan of 999. Take the current tax code, which is a mess. It's been here since 1913. Throw it out and put in a tax system with a 9% corporate income tax, a 9% tax on personal income, and a 9% national sales tax.
I was about to ask you that question, Herman, and you offered the answer to it. But this other one, a question is posed when I listen to your response. Nobody is sneaking out of America. What do you do with those that are sneaking in?
Those that are sneaking in, I believe we must first make sure we're working on the right problem. That's fundamental to my whole leadership style. I always challenge my staff when I was in business or anywhere, what's the right problem? What should the priority be? Do I have the right people around me? And then we can put together the right plans.
Would you oppose amnesty in every form?
I would oppose amnesty in every form because here are the 4 problems relative to immigration. It's not 1, it's 4. First, let's secure the border for real, not keep talking about it. Secondly, let's enforce the laws that are already on the books. Thirdly, I happen to believe that we can promote the path to citizenship that's already there. We simply need to clean up much of the bureaucracy that's preventing people from being inspired to come through the front door. And fourthly, what I would do with those illegal aliens that are already here, empower the states to do what the federal government can't do, hasn't done, and will not do.
Okay, and then yet we have legal immigration, and America is the most generous country in the world with over 1 million a year legally coming into the United States. And in fact, and is there such a thing as too many legal immigrants? What should that number be? Can we get too many?
I don't believe that there are too many legal immigrants because we all came from somewhere. It's just a matter of where we have a need and where we have an opportunity. In some communities, there might be a number that says we don't want to overload the system. But I think one of the things that has made America great is its diversity.
But Herman, we have 50 million people in line in foreign countries waiting to come into the United States legally. So how many would be too many?
I don't have an answer for that, Congressman. because I would have to look at, one, what type of qualifications do these 50 million people have? Secondly, what type of skills and education do they bring with them? If they're bringing us more problems than opportunities, then 50 million might be too many.
Would you, though, be favorable towards establishing a legal immigration policy that rewarded merits of applicants?
Yes. Yes.
And I very much appreciate that response. And then, let's see, I was going to take you back to the tax situation, because I know you have to vent yourself on that, Herman.
Phase one is the 999 plan, but phase two is to totally replace the tax code with the fair tax, which is a national sales tax. I have not given up on that idea. The reason that I'm not going to propose to do that as when I first become president is because we need to do a better job of informing and educating more of the American public so they can embrace and understand the paradigm shift from tax on income to tax on consumption. One of the biggest reasons, folks, that we need to get rid of the current tax code is because it allows bureaucrats to pick winners and losers. And it also costs the American people $430 billion a year just to pay your tax bill. Every time you send Uncle Sam $1, it costs you and me 30 cents to send in that dollar.
Time's up. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Professor George.
Thank you, Mr. Kane, for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
My first question concerns our obligations to human life and also the constitutional powers of the respective levels and branches of government. I want to preface it by recalling Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address. He was faced with an unconstitutional decision by the Supreme Court of the United States, the Dred Scott decision, which usurped the authority of the elected representatives of the people, the Congress, and the President, and purported to bind their hands indefinitely and decisively. Now, many argue today that we need a constitutional amendment to overturn the court's usurpative decision in Roe versus Wade. However, we have what President Lincoln didn't have, which is a 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which was, of course, ratified after Lincoln's untimely death. And Section 5 of the 14th Amendment expressly authorizes the Congress, by appropriate legislation, to enforce the guarantees of due process and equal protection contained in the amendment's first section. So as someone who believes, as I know you do, in the inherent and equal dignity of all members of the human family, including the child in the womb, would you, as President, propose to Congress appropriate legislation pursuant to the 14th Amendment to protect human life in all stages and conditions, even short of a constitutional amendment overturning Roe versus Wade?
Yes, I could support that.
And would you be prepared to confront the Supreme Court if it came to that? Take your case to the American people?
I would take my case to the American people, but first, let the Congress challenge the United States Congress to do its job. I have a great amount of respect for our system. I believe that the president has a responsibility to be president, which means national security, #1 priority. Secondly, the president has a responsibility to preserve, protect, and enforce the Constitution of the United States of America, not try and rewrite it. I don't believe we need to rewrite it, and don't try to work outside of it like we'll see in this current administration. And then thirdly, provide the strategic leadership on all of these issues that we face, which means setting a real clear agenda, a people's agenda, with the United States Congress, and then engaging the American people in the solutions to many of the problems we face, not creating legislation that's so big and complicated that the American people are left out of the loop.
Let me ask you a question about religious freedom and the freedom of conscience, the rights of conscience. In the state of Illinois, after the legislature there passed a civil unions bill, which the governor signed into law, the state government decided to exclude certain religiously affiliated foster care and adoption agencies, including Catholic and Protestant agencies, because those agencies, in line with the teachings of their faith, cannot in conscience place children with same-sex partners. Now, at least half of Illinois' foster and adoption funds, it turns out, come from the federal government. So my question is whether the federal government should be subsidizing states that discriminate against Catholic and other religious adoption agencies.
No, because I believe in the First Amendment. So the federal government should not be subsidizing any situation where it's discriminatory against any legitimate religion in this country.
Okay. I'm going to shift now to the question of marriage. All the major candidates for the presidency in 2012, including President Obama, share the position that marriage is properly defined in our law as the union of husband and wife. How does your own position differ from President Obama's position on that issue? And what would you do as president to defend marriage so defined?
The first thing that I would do is make it clear that I support the Defense of Marriage Act that was passed in 1996. I support that. Secondly, I happen to believe that the President of the United States, and I do support traditional marriage, no question about that. I always have. I've been consistent on that. And so I happen to believe that in addition to being the commander-in-chief, in addition to being responsible for the safety and security of this country, I also believe that the president is communicator-in-chief to talk about some of these values that our founding fathers got right. And I think that we ought to be the defending fathers in order to be able to do that. So I would use that platform as president to encourage some of those values that we know that the founding fathers embraced.
The data now seems very clearly to show a high correlation between poverty and the breakdown of a marriage culture.
Yes.
Where we have the breakdown of the marriage culture, we have poverty. I'm a person who believes that the Republican Party should be in the vanguard of fighting poverty. We should be an anti-poverty issue. But it seems to me that that means we need to be in the vanguard of rebuilding the marriage culture. It seems the two greatest engines to fight poverty ever created by man are the market system, the free market system, a vibrant economy, and the institution of marriage. I think we have a pretty good idea of what you would do to make us vibrant again economically. What can we do to rebuild the marriage culture, especially in poor and disadvantaged communities?
I think we have to stop incenting broken homes. We have to stop incenting young women to have more babies to get more money from the government. I believe that we have got to empower communities rather than making them more entitled to the government. Here's an example. The city of Detroit, for example. The city of Detroit, in my opinion, is a could be a big empowerment zone. When people are able to help themselves economically, then they are not forced to do some of the other things that contributes to the breakup of the marriage. It starts with a strong economic engine with opportunities for jobs, opportunities for entrepreneurship for people, and then I believe we will see a ripple effect in helping to rebuild the family structure in this country.
Mr. Kane, finally, will you choose as your running mate for vice president someone who shares your pro-life and your pro-marriage convictions?
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Senator DeMint.
Herman,
Jim.
thanks for being here. Sounds good, doesn't it, Herman? Probably the biggest economic problem we face as a nation is our level of debt. The spending, the borrowing, the debt is out of control. As you know, our debt's the size of our total economy, and the plans are continue to add to the debt,
Right.
despite the so-called debt limit debate deal that we had. What would you do to reduce our debt in the short term and the long term? Have you seen proposals that would move it in the right direction, or do you have one? What are we going to do to move away from adding to our debt?
Two things. First, we must boost economic growth. We can do that. This economy has the capacity. I know that bold tax changes like I'm talking about, even some of the other candidates are talking about, they will work. Let's look at the decade of the 60s. They worked. Under John F. Kennedy, they worked in the 80s. We must first get this economy growing upwards to a 5 or 6% GDP growth rate. And the way I would go after cutting the costs and the debt is the same way I have gone into companies when I've had to take over a business that might have been failing. First, an across the board cut of, pick a number, 10%. Then the hard work of a deep dive in every agency to eliminate programs that are in fact duplicative, outdated, based upon performance metrics, and eliminate a lot of those programs. The government accounting offices, you know, Jim, they routinely identify many of those things, but nothing is ever done. They are never actually acted upon. They're not going to be acted upon by 535 members of Congress. They're going to have to be acted upon with the leadership of the president. So that would be my approach. We would have to do a deep dive on every agency and find those, and then get serious about restructuring the big programs like Social Security. I believe in a personal retirement accounts approach.